Think you can spot a female narcissist? Most men can't, because you've been trained to look for the obvious kind: loud, arrogant, addicted to attention, openly selfish. But the more dangerous version doesn't announce herself. She blends in. She looks soft. She sounds self aware. She performs empathy. She presents as misunderstood, deep, just anxious, just traumatized, just sensitive. And if you don't know the pattern, you'll call her a good woman who's been hurt. Until 6 months later, you're tired, confused, apologizing for things you didn't do, and questioning your own memory like you've lost your mind. This is the covert narcissistic pattern. And yes, men can be covert narcissists too. Narcissism isn't a gendered trait, but the presentation can look different, and that difference is exactly why a lot of men miss it. This is not a clinical diagnosis. This is a reality check about a specific set of manipulative dynamics that show up in dating and relationships. If you recognize it early, you can protect your mind, your standards, and your future. If you don't, you end up donating your peace to someone who treats love like leverage. So let's break down what the covert narcissistic woman actually looks like. Not on social media, not in the first date version, but in the pattern that shows up over time. First, understand the core rule. A healthy woman wants connection. A covert narcissistic woman wants control that feels like connection. She doesn't bond with you. She positions you. She doesn't build a relationship. She builds a system. A system where your job is to regulate her emotions, carry her chaos, and constantly prove you deserve basic respect. And the price of admission is your self-trust. Because if she can get you to doubt yourself, she can do anything. The first weapon is manufactured vulnerability. And it's almost genius, because it looks like intimacy. Very early, she gives you a confession, something heavy, childhood trauma, a betrayal story, a dramatic ex, a mental health struggle, a fear she's never told anyone. And it happens fast, too fast, before you've earned trust, before you've built real history, before you've even seen her under pressure. Most men interpret this as depth, as honesty, as a rare connection. She opened up to me. I must be different. And that's exactly the hook, because the goal isn't closeness. The goal is early emotional investment. She's trying to get you attached to the role of rescuer, the role of protector, the role of therapist, the role of the one man who finally understands her. And once you accept that role, you stop evaluating her. You start managing her. You stop asking, is she right for me? And you start asking, how can I help her feel safe? That's not romance. That's a job. A full-time position with unlimited overtime. And the pay is occasional affection. A healthy woman becomes vulnerable and then also builds stability. She doesn't make you responsible for her emotional life. She shares, then she grows. She communicates, then she regulates. Manufactured vulnerability does the opposite. It creates one-sided obligation. Her pain becomes the reason you can't have boundaries. Her history becomes the excuse for her disrespect. Her trauma triggers become a permanent override button that cancels your needs. And here's the part men miss. Every secret she gives you early can later be used as a shield. If you ask for consistency, you're pressuring her. If you ask for clarity, you're not safe. If you ask for reciprocity, you don't understand what she's been through. If you pull back, you're abandoning her like everyone else. So the vulnerability wasn't shared to build trust. It was shared to preload guilt, to create a moral trap. Where you feel like leaving means you're harming a wounded person. And you're not. You're leaving a pattern. Next comes emotional hostage taking. This is where her emotional swings become your responsibility. She's fine, then suddenly devastated. She's warm, then suddenly cold. She's affectionate, then suddenly distant. And it always seems tied to something you did. A tone, a delayed reply, a look, a sentence, a harmless joke, a small boundary. And now you're in a panic loop, trying to figure out what changed, trying to fix it, trying to get back to the good version. That's the trap. Because the good version becomes the reward, and your anxiety becomes the fuel. Healthy people express emotion because they feel it. Manipulative people express emotion to produce outcomes. Not every emotional woman is manipulative, but a consistent pattern of emotional spikes that lead to you apologizing, chasing, over-explaining, and surrendering boundaries, that's not love. That's conditioning. Crying becomes a tool. Anger becomes a tool. Disappointment becomes a tool. Silence becomes a tool. And if you grew up believing a good man fixes it, you'll become her perfect employee. You'll start living to prevent her mood. You'll start scanning her face like a weather forecast. You'll start pre-compromising. You'll stop telling the truth because the truth causes problems. You'll learn to lie softly just to keep the peace. And that's how men lose themselves. Not through one big betrayal, through 1,000 tiny surrenders. Then comes the most sophisticated weapon, reality distortion. Gaslighting doesn't start with obvious lies. It starts with small rewrites, tiny denials, selective memory, confident contradictions. You remember a conversation one way. She insists it happened another way. You remember her promise. She claims she never said that. You bring up something she did. She turns it into something you did. You say, "That hurt." She says, "You're too sensitive." You say, "This feels disrespectful." She says, "You're insecure." You say, "I need clarity." She says, "You're controlling." Over time, your brain stops trusting itself. And once you stop trusting yourself, you start trusting her. Not because she's right, but because you're exhausted. This is how the cage is built, not with locks, with doubt. You begin asking permission to feel what you feel. You begin rewriting your own boundaries because you're not sure you're allowed to have them. You begin thinking maybe you're the problem. That's the whole point. A rational man is easy to manipulate if you can get him to constantly self-correct, because a conscientious man will always try to be fair. He'll consider her perspective. He'll question his own certainty. He'll try to communicate better. He'll try to be more patient. He'll try to improve, and she will weaponize those good traits against him. Now let's talk about the performance trap. This is where love becomes a scorecard. She positions herself as the evaluator. You are always being graded. Everything you do is almost enough. You plan a date. She finds what was missing. You support her. She highlights how you didn't do it the right way. You improve. She raises the standard. You apologize. She accepts it, but remembers it forever. You give. She receives it as normal. And every time you start meeting the target, she moves it. Because the goal is not satisfaction. The goal is leverage. This often runs on intermittent reinforcement, which is the most addictive reward system humans have. Just enough approval to keep you trying. Just enough affection to keep you hopeful. Just enough good days to make you question whether the bad days were real. It's the same reason slot machines keep people playing. Random wins create stronger addiction than consistent rewards. And now your nervous system is hooked, not to her, to the possibility of her, to the fantasy that if you do it perfectly, she'll finally relax and love you consistently. That day doesn't come, because if she became consistently healthy, she'd lose her power. So she has to keep you chasing. And the more you chase, the more respect you lose. Because chasing trains the dynamic that she's the prize and you're the applicant. And a relationship where one person auditions is a relationship where one person eventually gets crushed. Then there's the emotional economy. Her emotions are urgent. Yours are inconvenient. If she's upset, the whole house revolves around her. If you're upset, you're starting problems. If she needs comfort, you show up. If you need comfort, you're too much. If she's anxious, you must reassure her. If you're anxious, you must man up. Over time, you become emotionally self-sufficient, not because you're strong, but because you're punished for needing anything. Men in this pattern often say, "I feel numb." That's not weakness. That's self-protection. Your system learned that feelings are liabilities in that relationship, so it shut down. And then she'll hit you with the final insult. You're emotionally unavailable. After she trained you to be. Next is competence assassination. This one is subtle because it masquerades as help. She questions your judgment. She corrects your decisions. She implies your solutions aren't good enough. She offers guidance for things you already handle. She second guesses your plans. She undermines your confidence with tiny comments, not direct insults, just little cuts. You're sure that's the right way? I would have done it differently. That's not what I meant, but okay. Are you seriously wearing that? You always take things the wrong way. If it happens consistently, you start hesitating. You start seeking her approval. You start doubting your instincts. And then you become easier to control because a man who trusts himself is dangerous to a manipulator. But a man who doubts himself will accept almost anything if it sounds confident. That's the target. To get you to outsource your authority. To get you to check with her before you act. To get you to stop leading your own life. And when that happens, she can then resent you for being weak. Because covert narcissism is built on contradiction, she will reduce you, then blame you for being reduced. Then comes isolation. Again, it's rarely a direct command. It's a slow tax placed on your outside world. Every time you see friends, she has a crisis. Every time you visit family, she's hurt. You didn't prioritize her. Every social commitment turns into conflict. Your friendships become immature. Your family becomes toxic. Your hobbies become avoidance. And eventually, you shrink your world to avoid the drama. That's when she wins, because now she controls your reality. She becomes your primary source of emotional feedback. And if her feedback is distorted, your whole life becomes distorted. This is why men in these relationships often look drained. Not because they're weak men, because they're living inside someone else's psychological weather system. Then there's guilt manufacturing. She creates a permanent sense that you owe her. She sacrifices loudly. She keeps a ledger. She reminds you of what she's done. She minimizes what you've done. And because you're a man with a conscience, you start trying to make it fair. You try harder. You give more. You tolerate more. You apologize more. You compromise more. But the debt never clears. It can't. Because the debt is the control mechanism. A man who feels indebted won't enforce standards. He'll feel guilty for having them. And the moment you feel guilty for having boundaries, the relationship is already in decline. Now let's talk about the hope addiction. This is the part that traps good men the longest, because she's not awful all the time. Sometimes she's incredible. Sometimes she's affectionate, playful, warm. feminine, supportive. Sometimes she looks at you like you're the only man alive. And those moments hit harder because they're rare. So you hang on. You tell yourself that's who she really is. No, that's the version of her you get when she's getting what she wants. It's not that those moments are fake. It's that they're conditional. And conditional love is not love. It's control dressed as romance. The more chaotic the lows are, the more intense the highs feel. That's trauma bonding. And trauma bonds feel like destiny. They feel like a deep connection nobody understands. But it's not depth, it's dysregulation. So what's the end game? The end game is not marriage, and not even stability. The end game is turning you into an emotional appliance. A man who runs on standby. A man who anticipates her moods. A man who lives to avoid conflict. A man who performs masculinity by being useful, silent, and compliant. A man who suppresses his instincts and calls it maturity. A man who has no needs, no standards, no spine. Because once you become that man, she can extract comfort from you without giving respect. She can have your protection without offering loyalty. She can have your resources without offering reciprocity. She can have your attention without offering peace. That's the system. And once you see it as a system, you stop taking it personally. You stop thinking, if I just love her harder, it will fix it. You can't love someone out of a pattern. You can't sacrifice yourself into being chosen. You can't communicate your way into a person having a conscience. You either have leverage through boundaries or you become fuel. Now here's the part that matters. What do you do if you recognize this? First, stop diagnosing and start observing patterns. Anyone can cry. Anyone can have trauma. Anyone can have a bad day. The question is consistency. The question is accountability. The question is repair. A healthy woman can be messy and still be responsible. A manipulative woman uses mess as a weapon. So watch for these signs. Does she take responsibility without being forced? Does she apologize with changed behavior, not just words? Can she hear your boundaries without punishing you? Can she handle no without retaliation? Does she ever ask how you're doing and mean it? Does she build or only consume? Does she bring peace or only intensity? Second, slow everything down. Covert manipulation accelerates intimacy because speed bypasses discernment. Don't rush commitment. Don't rush cohabitation. Don't rush financial entanglement. Don't rush exclusivity if you're already seeing red flags. Time reveals character. Third, keep your outside world strong. Maintain your friendships. Maintain your hobbies. Maintain your fitness. Maintain your purpose. A man with structure is hard to hijack. A man with no structure becomes easy to emotionally occupy. Fourth, enforce clean boundaries. Not angry boundaries, not lectures. Short, calm lines. This doesn't work for me. I'm not doing that. If that's how this goes, I'm out. And then you follow through. Because boundaries without consequences are just requests. And manipulators don't respect requests. They respect outcomes. Fifth, stop feeding the performance trap. Stop trying to earn basic respect. Stop trying to prove your intentions. Stop over-explaining. Stop negotiating your standards. A healthy partner doesn't need you to beg for fairness. If you have to beg, you're already beneath her in the dynamic. Sixth, rebuild your self-trust. This is the real healing. If you've been gaslit, you'll have to relearn something fundamental. Your perceptions matter. Your feelings matter. Your memory matters. Your instincts matter. And you don't need permission to act on them. Talk to a therapist if you can. Not to save the relationship, to restore your internal clarity. Because clarity is what manipulation steals first. And once you have clarity, decisions become simple. Not easy, but simple. If you are in a relationship that consistently destroys your peace, your confidence, your friendships, your standards, and your self respect, that is not love. That is a slow psychological robbery. And if you're thinking, but what if she changes? Real change leaves evidence, accountability, consistency, repair, effort without you begging, professional help, ownership without excuses. If all you're getting is tears, promises, and the same cycles, that's not change. That's maintenance. And you are the one being maintained as a supply. Here's the truth most men need to hear. You don't win with a covert narcissist by being nicer. You win by being clear. You win by being calm. You win by being willing to walk away. Because the one thing that breaks manipulation is a man who doesn't fear being alone. A man who would rather have peace than a relationship that feels like psychological debt. A man who knows love should add stability, not erase identity. A man who understands that your job in dating is not to save someone. Your job is to choose wisely and protect your mind while you do it. If you recognize these patterns, don't feel shame. This trap catches good men because good men assume good faith. They assume emotions are honest. They assume vulnerability is connection. They assume love is mutual. That's not stupidity. That's decency. But decency without discernment becomes self-destruction. So take the lesson, build your standards, strengthen your boundaries, protect your peace, and never again confuse intensity with intimacy. Because the most dangerous relationships don't start with hate. They start with a story that makes you feel needed and end with you forgetting who you were before you met her. If this hit too close to home, that's not an accident. That's your instincts waking up. And your instincts are usually right. Stay sharp, stay disciplined, and don't donate your life to someone who treats love like a weapon.